And welcome to the channel, everyone. I'm Ted, and this is the Speculative Bookshelf. And today I'm going to go over my top 10 horror novels. Now, these are not what I consider the 10 best, because frankly, I haven't read enough of them to claim any novels the best. But these are my favorites. And I'm not going to list them in order from 10 to 1, or even from 1 to 10. uh, because it's like having a favorite child. They're all your favorites, right? So I'm going to show these in chronological order from the time they were published. And the first one goes all the way back to 1842. And this was written by a Swiss church pastor who wrote under the name of Jeremias Gotthelf. And this is a novella, and it's called The Black Spider. And it's like a biblical parable almost, the way it's written. It takes place in a Swiss village. It starts off hundreds of years ago. And it's about a village of serfs who are all under the control of the Lord, the landowner. And the Lord is just an evil taskmaster. And so the Lord has all these serfs build him a new castle. And when they're finally done with that, there's just enough time left in the year for the serfs to go back and tend their own land to tend to the crops so they have food over the winter. But no, 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 not so fast, says the Lord. Now I want you to uh, plant a row of 100 trees along the path. And the trees are up on top of a hill far away. So they have to cut down the trees, bring them down. And they have 1 month to do this, or else there'll be hell to pay, of course. Well, the men are all in despair. They don't know what they're going to do. When all of a sudden, a green man appears, and of course, you know who that represents. He tells them that he can take care of this for them. All it's going to cost them is to hand over an unchristened child when it's born. And all the men say, forget about that, forget about that. But then the Christine, unbeknownst to the men, she makes a deal with the guy. I will get you this unchristened boy when he's born. They do indeed get the all the 100 trees planted within the month, but then after the woman fesses up to what she's done, this deal that she made with the devil, uh, they're determined not to follow through with it. They're going to, uh, trick this guy. So, anyways, as things happen, he's deprived of his child, and on the spot where old Christine had been kissed by the man in green to, kind of seal the deal, a spot starts growing. It grows bigger and bigger, and a spider grows in that spot, and it bursts open, and zillions of baby spiders come out and go out and wreak havoc. So, anyways, that's the basic premise. So it's all about how the people had this spider to deal with. I recently did a reread of this story, and I got to this spot right at the beginning because all the villagers are having a feast. They're getting a feast of all kinds of food ready for the christening of a newborn child. And in this chapter, they describe beside the cheese, she placed the mighty Zupfa, which is that specialty of bakers in the Bern region, woven like a woman's braids, beautifully brown and yellow, and baked using the finest flours, eggs, and butter, as big around as a 1-year-old child, and almost as heavy. Anyways, I got to reading all about that food and about the braided bread, and that's exactly what my mother used to make when I was a kid. My mother was German, but German, Austria, Switzerland, they all have that same bread within their traditions. So that got me, uh, well, I had to go bake one myself. And here's my dough braided, waiting for the oven to get hot. And 20 minutes in the oven, and here's what it looked like. Okay, are we ready? This is a Swiss Zupfa. Can't really tell, it's braided. But anyways, here we go. We're going to go take our daily walk while this cools and then come back and chow down. Doesn't that smell good? So anyways, this story, it is for an 1842 story and written by a preacher at that. It is really creepy. The image of the spider emerging from the woman's flesh is just unforgettable, and the whole story just gives you this medieval moral chill up your spine. And it's not badly written either. Gut his prose it's almost a biblical style. It could be a story out of the Bible. Coming up next from 1962, we jump ahead 120 years, and from 1962 comes Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes. And if you've seen any of my other videos, you'll probably know now already that Ray Bradbury is my favorite author. And Something Wicked This Way Comes is a wickedly creepy novel. It's actually kind of a spiritual sequel to Dandelion Wine. It doesn't have any of the same characters in it, but it takes place in the same locale. And the two protagonists, the two young boys, they're analogous to the two boys in Dandelion Wine. This time, the two boys' names are Jim and Will. And one night, October 24th, the week before Halloween, at 3 a.m., the carnival rolls into town. And it is a dark carnival. And going back to the comparison with Dandelion Wine, where Dandelion Wine, the two boys, it's more of a celebration of the boy just realizing their aliveness and their joy in the world. Something Wicked This Way Come flips the coin, and it looks at the dark side. It examines good and evil and people's loneliness and their fear of their own mortality. And the carnival is owned by two evil men, one of them being the illustrated man, although they just mention his tattoos, but they don't make a overt reference to the illustrated man. But these two guys, they prey on people's fears of growing old and of loneliness and of their mortality. Now, if you're familiar with Ray Bradbury, you know that he writes in a very lyrical and poetic fashion. And even in 1962, it could seem, like writing from a much earlier era. For that reason, many, if not most of today's readers who have come of age since the 1990s and who are used to the contemporary writing of the coarse, in-your-face style of writing, they might find Bradbury's prose a little hard to take. For me, though, his writing is engaging and hypnotic, and I willingly submit to his spell. A third, it's from the same year as Ray Bradbury's novel, just 4 days later, in fact, it was released. And this is Shirley Jackson's We Have Always Lived in the Castle. Now, this is a story of two sisters and an uncle who live alone in this huge, estate, this huge house. They're alone because the family was wiped out uh, some years earlier by a poisoning incident during dinner. And naturally, since it happened in the home and uh, among the family, it brings the suspicion of all the other villagers down upon the sisters. And then one day, a cousin arrives that upsets their creepy little happiness that's going on. And, he wants to find money that's, is rightfully his, that he should inherit. And so that causes tension among the sisters and the cousin. And then, of course, the tension between among the villagers and the sisters. And there's nothing really horrifying that goes on. It's just the horror is just more psychological. The loyalty of these damaged people, the sisters, to each other. The older sister has developed agoraphobia, where she's afraid to even go out in public. And so the menace is all just subtle and suffocating. And Shirley Jackson writes this in a very delicate and deceptively calm language. The young girl, who's the creepy one, really, uh, she just talks in a very kind of a sing-song, happy-go-lucky, creepy, creepy type of way, and it gives the whole story like a kind of a fairy tale rhythm. And actually, I was surprised when I started compiling this that to find out that this was a 1962 release, because just the whole feel of it's got that gothic feel, of course, and then it just feels like it must have been written decades earlier. So if you like that gothic type of psychological horror, this book will be for you. Fourth on my list comes this one from 5 years later. It's probably the book that just really opened the, the commercial floodgates to for horror. And this is from 1967. It's Ira Levin's Rosemary's Baby, which you'll recognize as a very famous movie from that time, starring Mia Farrow. And it's about a young couple that moves into an elegant Gothic New York apartment building. And of course, we have creepy, eerie neighbors. And Mia Farrow, or rather uh, Rosemary, uh, gets pregnant, and people start, bothering her and manipulating her, and and gradually Rosemary comes to suspect that these people, they're after her baby for some kind of ritual sacrifice. And here too, like with Jackson, the writing is very plain and simple, almost minimalist, in fact. And this just further serves to heighten the dread, because it just makes everything feel real. 4 years later, in 1971, came really great, a great book by an actor turned author, Thomas Tryon. He was an actor. His most famous role was in the movie, the title role in the movie, The Cardinal. And it's not a baseball movie. Anyway, it's called The Other. And this is the quintessential evil twin story about two brothers. They live in Depression era Connecticut, in a small village. And tragic events start to happen that are tied to one of the brothers' influence over the other. And it's got a great twist to it, and I won't tell you much more of the plot. because anything I say could, potentially be a spoiler. But there is no gore in this book. Again, it's all psychological horror, well, unless you want to count the pitchfork incident in the barn in the hayloft. But like I said, it's just pure psychological horror that just grips you through until the reveal. The novel plays on the horror of childhood cruelty and psychological fracture. Yeah, the one twin is quite fractured, and the violence is, low key. Like I said, nothing gory or you know uh, really extreme. It's just all a dread that sticks close to the heart of the family. Tryon, I feel he's one of the underappreciated writers. Um, he writes with a clean, traditional storytelling style, and the restraint he uses in his writing just it just drives home the terror when it does arrive. Now, I've read some reviews that call his writing self-consciously literary, which, to tell you the truth, I don't even know what that means. I mean, I know what literary means. I know what self-conscious means, but how do you write in a self? I guess maybe they say he's trying too hard. Well, anyways, I don't buy it. It's like the way people complain about Bradbury's, style too. In fact, he combines Bradbury's descriptive imagery with a psychological darkness that goes far beyond anything that even Bradbury wrote. In fact, Stephen King, in his book about horror, Dance Macabre, he called The Other, along with Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist, as the three watershed books that just prove that horror could be, commercially successful. And the fact that NYRB Classics reissued The Other alongside such authors as Shirley Jackson and Henry James suggests that Tryon's work has a psychological depth that goes beyond mere horror. So I've already covered two of Stephen King's three watershed books, Rosemary's Baby and The Other, and the third one he mentioned was The Exorcist, which is next on my list from 1971. There's I don't think I need to say much about that. The Exorcist is well known by everyone from the film. And just in case you don't know, it's about a young girl, Regan McNeil, I think is her last name. uh, she starts exhibiting these violent and inexplicable behaviors. And when their family doctor just exhausts all possible medical uh, explanations, the mother just turns to an exorcist. And this book works because it hits at the fear that evil isn't just a metaphorical concept; it's real and it's literal, intelligent and malevolent. And I tell you, I was 19 when I saw this at the theater, and I had just gotten stationed across the San Francisco Bay in the little town of Mill Valley. The mountain is Mount Tamalpais. There's an Air Force radar station on top. Not anymore. This was like I said, 1973 when the movie came out. And to get to the radar site, you went through a state park, which was where the gate was closed at night, and uh, a guard shack manned by a park ranger would open the gate for you to go through. And once you got through, for one thing, I had just gotten stationed there. just a couple of days ago. And now I'm driving up this dark, empty forest road after seeing this movie, and I was creeped out. But I loved it, and I would recommend this to anyone who likes uh, really deep, visceral uh, terror. Next on my list, looks like it's number 4 on the countdown, but like I said, that's only sequential, not fourth in preference. This one now comes from 1973. There was also a movie made out of it. Robert Marasco is the author, and the title of the book is Burnt Offerings. And I would say this is a haunted house story, but it's not a it's not a haunted house story. It is an evil house story. A couple rents an estate for the summer, uh, and they find it at an unbelievably low uh, rental price. And that's because it comes with one proviso. Uh, the owner's mother stays, and it's a huge house, and in one wing of the house, uh, the owner's mother stays in her room. And it's the couple's responsibility to just prepare her dinner and just leave it for her outside her bedroom door. And that's the only thing they got to do in order to get it for that low price. Well, of course, you know, weird things start to happen, evil things start to happen, and the couple come to discover that the house feeds on their suffering. And as as rooms in the house repair themselves, conversely, the couple start breaking down physically and psychologically. Like I said, this isn't a haunted house. The house itself is evil. It's a parasitic organism. It's predatory architecture. And Stephen King has even acknowledged that this book was the, if not the inspiration, a major inspiration for The Shining. So, moving on to number 3 then. And this is my only encore author. I told you I think Thomas Tryon is underappreciated, and I've got a second book of his on this list, and it's called Harvest Home from 1973 also. Harvest Home and the other were his first 2 books, and they're the only horror uh, books that he wrote. And he wrote several other books after that. Only one of them was successful, which was the name of it is Lady, which is kind of a gothic mystery. So it's getting into that, psychological, mystery that he's so successful with. But the other books that he wrote were just historical romance and novellas about uh, Hollywood, the Hollywood film industry and such. And they didn't go over well with critics or the public. So he's kind of just fallen off the radar of most people these days. But so, anyways, in Harvest Home, we have a modern city family who's again in New England, moving into a idyllic New England village, unaware that the community practiced some ancient fertility rituals that are rooted in blood sacrifice. And the couple find that once they're inside this this circle of the villagers, there's no escape. You know, like the Eagle said, you can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave. I think this novel is rural folk horror at its purest. As I mentioned earlier, Tryon's really good at the slow burn narrative style, and he really cranks up the creep factor to 11 on this one. Which brings us to number 2 from 1975. And if it looks like I'm stuck in the 70s, well, you may be right. So from 1975, a book that was, again, made into a movie from Frank DeFelitta, we have Audrey Rose. And in this story, a grieving father becomes convinced that this young girl named Ivy, who has been suffering these terrible nightmares uh, involving fire. Well, this guy believes that Ivy is the reincarnation of his daughter, Audrey Rose, who died in a fiery car crash along with her mother. He confronts Ivy's father about his belief that Ivy is the reincarnation of Audrey Rose, and what just begins as a strange claim from a stranger turns obsessive, culminating in a psychological unraveling and a dramatic courtroom battle over the possession of the child's soul. Funny thing is, I saw the movie when it came out, and I thought it was really faithful to the book. I didn't find anything to criticize it over in that regard. Yet, for some reason, the movie just fell flat with me. The book just gripped me, especially the final climax of it. I was just you know uh, on the edge of my seat, to coin a phrase. However, the movie, as much as I was anticipating it, just like I said, it failed to render any of that because the writing, De Felida's writing, was just that good that he really drew you into the story and made you feel everything. He made you feel the dead girl's father's grief and his longing, and of course you felt Audrey Rose's father, his uh, horror at this guy wanting his daughter, and then of course you also really get drawn into Audrey Rose's own emotional state. And like I said, it kept my heart pounding until the very last page, and I highly recommend it. And so that brings us to the number 1 book, chronologically, anyways. And this one comes from 1976. So just to recap, we started it in 1842, and then the books went from 1962 to 1962 to 1967, 71, 71, 73, 73, 75, and this was not deliberate. I didn't even realize uh, those dates when I was just thinking up, which books stick in my mind, which ones that all these years later just stay with me, and I can relive that horror all over again just thinking about the books. So number 1 is the novelization of The Omen by David Seltzer. David Seltzer wrote the screenplay for the movie, which, as a matter of fact, is also my number 1 horror movie of all time. So David Seltzer wrote the screenplay, and to increase the publicity for the movie, to create anticipation, the studio had him write a novelization of it. So he wrote the novelization, and the book was released just 2 or 3 weeks before the film was released. And the story, in a nutshell, is an American diplomat secretly adopts an orphaned infant when his own child dies at birth, since the mother had been already had experienced a couple of miscarriages. The father is given this proposition to take this orphan baby and replace his uh, dead child without the mother even knowing about it. And as the child grows older, there's a series of mysterious accidental deaths surrounding him. And it pushes their parents to the terrifying realization that their child may just be the Antichrist. The dread really builds in the story as rational explanations just fall away and only to be replaced by religious prophecy that just feels all too plausible. The book itself was not a very long book. Like I said, it was a novelization of the film, so it's not going to take up too many pages. It was 272 pages in paperback. Again, after a recent reread, I felt I wanted more of it. Not that I wanted the story to continue, but that I wanted more within it. Uh, Sort of the way Stephen King, really pads his books with a lot of backstory and uh, of the characters or of places or whatnot. Seltzer did such a good job of just involving me in the story. I wanted to know more about the characters and of the places and the situations. Like I said, the movie is my favorite horror movie of all time, and the book, like I said, it follows the film very faithfully. And in fact, as I was reading it, I'm just picturing the movie going on in my mind. So I can heartily recommend this book to you. Heartily, not hardly. I can hardly not recommend it. But anyways, read it. So that's my 10 choices. And like I said, the last book in the list is published in 1976. And 6 of the 10 books come from the 1970s. And it was during the 60s and the 70s that horror really, it just really made its mark. It it what did it do? Uh, it set stakes in the literary world. And like I said, that's when horror really came of age in publishing. And after that, in the 80s, publishers tried to capitalize on the success of the 60s and 70s horrors, and they just started cranking out horror book after horror book, and just an assembly line of horror schlock, that I as I call it. And the reading public they just got sick of it, and that led to a horror implosion in the 90s. And as you can see from my video previously, where I uh, gave my 10 worst horror books that I've read, all those come from the 80s and later. I mean, that, like I said, that's not to say that there's no good horror that's been written since the 90s. I mean, there's Robert McCammon, T.E.D. Klein, Joe Hill, Clive Barker. They've all published great stuff. But, like most things in life, it's the like films and music. It's films and music from your younger years that sticks with you the most, and just really becomes, like they say, the soundtrack of your life. In less than 2 weeks, I'm turning 71, so do the math. I read all these books when they came out when I was in my 20s. But unlike a lot of things where you look back nostalgically and you try to relive that pleasure from then, these have held these have held up for me. They stood the test of time. Uh, Recent rereads of several of these books have reaffirmed their place in my memory and my heart as my favorites. So I hope you enjoyed that look at my top 10 horror novels, feel free to drop a comment below and let me know what your favorites are. And from seeing my list and seeing what really appeals to me the most, give me some suggestions. What do you think I should read of today's authors? That if I like those 10 books, I'll like this one. So once again, thanks for watching, and until next time, happy reading.